Welcome everybody, welcome to the Academic Writing Center, welcome to our first webinar on generative AI and writer autonomy, and a very warm welcome to our three speakers today, Melissa, Bethany, and Sam. My name is Divya, and I'm the founder and director of the Writing Center, a freely available service to anyone affiliated to and publishing under Université Paris-Saclay, and we are hosted in Central Supélec Research Center. This webinar is accompanied by an interactive Miro space, which you all received a link to in the confirmation email 10 minutes ago. I will be managing this space as well as the chat here on Teams, so please don't hesitate to contribute your thoughts and ideas. I'll now hand over to you, Melissa, and see you all on the other side of this exciting conversation.
Thank you so much, Divya, for that lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic of generative AI.
Melissa, I think you're muted. Melissa, I'm sorry.
Because you muted me. Okay, well, thank you, Divya, for that lovely introduction. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. Over the next hour or so, we'd like to share with you some ideas and insights into why the topic of generative AI and writer autonomy is relevant in higher education and research publication. So as many of you already know, generative AI is a technology that can create content based on a set of rules and data without explicit human input. And for me, I like to kind of think of that any classic science fiction movie or film where the person says, computer, run a simulation, and then the computer goes, done, right? So when considering this technology and its place in various writing endeavors within academia, in today's webinar, we hope to discuss, explore, and exchange ideas on its benefits and limitations. So our panelists are here to share their experiences and engage in productive discussion. And so throughout the webinar, I encourage you, the audience, to participate via the interactive whiteboard, as Divya mentioned, and to also ask questions via the chat feature on Teams. And I believe the link has already been provided to you. Joining me today are two panelists. So Bethany Cagnol, the Director of Elevate Center for Scientific Communication at Institut Polytechnique de Paris, and Sam Ferens, computational scientist at Cosmostat Lab at CEA. So before we begin, let's introduce ourselves and give a brief overview of our backgrounds and expertise. So Bethany, if you could start us off.
Thanks so much, Melissa. And I hope everyone can hear me all right. First of all, thank you so much for this invitation. I'm deeply honored, and I really look forward to taking a deep dive into this subject with you, Melissa, Sam, and thank you so much, Divya, for the invitation. I was really, really touched. You reached out across the highway, so that we could geek out on generative AI together this afternoon during our lunch break. So I'm Bethany Cagnol, and as Melissa said, I'm launching a new center called the Elevate Center, which is very similar to the Writing Center at Université Paris-Saclay. So I'm at the Institut Polytechnique de Paris. I'm also an English teacher at Télécom Paris. So a lot of my students are studying computer science. So I am bathing in this field every single day, and I'm watching my students test it out. I'm watching PhD students use it. I'm seeing researchers use it. I'm keeping a close eye on how everybody seems to be cautiously looking at it or using it, accepting it, or even rejecting it in their own professional environment. My background is actually in professional training. Actually, I have about 15 years worth of experience in the continuing education sector as well. So training adults, training in companies, and I've also seen quite a lot of ways how technology can shift and change the tides of our sector. So watching how we are adapting to artificial intelligence is interesting and fascinating. And that's why I'm here today, to learn more from you guys, but also just to share my experience.
Okay. Great, Bethany. Thanks a lot. And Sam, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much again for the invitation. I share Bethany's flattery in being invited to attend this session. It's really exciting and interesting topic to discuss. So my background is in astrophysics. I did a PhD at UCL in London many years ago. Back then, AI and what we usually refer to in the domain as machine learning was just kind of, starting as a thing that could be applied to astrophysical data. And you fast forward to today, and if you look on any archive of scientific literature, you'll find, easily 20 to 50% of the papers coming out are using some form of AI, machine learning applications or tools in the work that they're doing. And new things like language models such as ChatGPT and so on are also starting to creep in as new productivity tools that have an impact on the way we work and the way we approach the work that we do. So in the lab I work in at the moment at CA is a lab that specializes in combining the state-of-the-art in signal processing and AI tools in the domain of cosmology in particular. So trying to understand the origin and history of the universe, but by using the latest tools that we can to help us analyze the data. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Sam. And to tell you a little bit about me, I'm Melissa Ann, and along with my role as moderator, I'll be sharing my views on Gen AI based on my collective experiences as a language learner, actually, a researcher and an instructor, a writer and a writing instructor, and a proofreader. So all of those things combined. Currently, most of my work is with doctoral candidates, postdocs, and faculty members, and about 95% of those writers, English is not their first language. So I'm seeing a lot of use with Gen AI, lots of questions, how can I use it, etc. And to understand how the writers that I see might be using generative AI, I've tested a lot of tools as well. So things like ChatGPT, Grammarly Go, Trinka, PaperPal, as well as PDF Gear, Research Rabbit, Site, Litmaps, and most recently, I've been delving into Perplexity. So that's just a little bit about me. So let's dive a little deeper then into the topic of generative AI and writer autonomy, where we're thinking of writer autonomy in the context of AI tools, the degree of control a writer has over the generative AI they are using. So I'm going to divide this discussion into two parts. The first part is going to be the relationship between writers and generative AI technology. And then the second part is going to be ethical concerns over its application in higher education. So to kick things off, let's take a closer look at this humans versus technology. The question I'd like to pose to our panelists now is, how do you see the relationship between the two? And what, in your experience, do you see as the benefits and drawbacks of generative AI in higher education and research? So maybe we can start off with Bethany. How do you see this in your own work?
Thanks, Melissa. It's a great question, and to be honest with you, I've taken a kind of an observer's seat on the matter, rather than choosing any particular side. But I think I've observed in my context in the higher education establishments, I've kind of observed that people are breaking up into like different camps. There's like the first camp, which is like I've heard of this chat GPP or ChatGPT or whatever it is, and whatever it's called, and I don't have time to check it out, but I really need to take the time to do so. There are still quite a lot of people in the higher education sector who feel that way. Then there's the another second group of people who feel like they won't touch it with a 60-foot pole. They think it's the devil incarnate. They think that it will rob their students of their voices. It'll rob them of their jobs. That they should resist and forbid the use of any LLMs, of any large language models whatsoever in their approach. And that seems to be a second group. I see it. I hear those voices. I do, and I try to stay, as diplomatic as I can. And then the third group seems to be the group of individuals in higher education who seem cautiously optimistic. They are curious. They are interested in training themselves in how it works. They are keeping a kind of open dialogue with their students as well as their department directors. They're keeping an open dialogue with the school itself, and I think that's a very healthy dialogue to have. From my perspective, that's actually where I feel I stand, and so. They conduct these kind of cross-disciplinary and cross-institutional conversations, much like we're having today. So those of you who are present today actually get extra points if you were my students. And then the fourth group, we actually have the social influencers. Many of you may be on social media and been checking out some of these people who are just shouting from the rooftops how awesome generative AI is, how cool it is, how cool ChatGPT is, that you should be using it. And if you're not using it, you're so uncool. And you should be investing even in the paid versions. And if you're not, you're just like, you're not one of us. And I don't think that's necessarily a healthy dialogue, but I'm still keeping a close eye on those individuals because they seem quite interested in releasing the latest information and the latest trends, and it's actually quite interesting to observe their dialogue as well. So, Melissa, I hope I answered your question. Is that I feel like I'm in the third group myself, which is the sort of cautiously optimistic group, and I think that it's our turn to have a healthy dialogue about this.
And in your perspective, how do you see it impacting the students that you work with? I'm very curious to hear about that because in my domain, so to speak, I'm working mostly with doctoral students and faculty, but I would love to hear what are you seeing at the bachelor's, the master's level in terms of what the students are doing? What are you seeing in terms of maybe the style of writing that's coming out there, skill set, that kind of thing? Could you speak more to that?
Sure thing. Yes, we have a lot of engineering students, specialized master's students that I've been working with. I'll be honest with you, they're using it. I mean, they're using it readily. The term digital native is nothing new. And so we've been seeing generations of students grow up with technology, and we've had this conversation before. I mean, a few times. I think Sam will have some really good comments about that coming up. And so I see in my classrooms students using it, and I'm keeping an open dialogue with that. At the same time, I'm also very, very sensitive to whether or not they want to use it. I've incorporated it automatically into my lesson plans this year because just out of sheer curiosity, I've been doing it. At the same time, on a very small percentage, a very, very small percentage of students here at Télécom Paris, they're also very sensitive to the environmental impact of these very, very large, generative models and the environmental impact that it can have. And so some of them have actually said to me in class, I really don't want to use it. These are computer scientists in training, and they say, I really don't feel comfortable using it because I don't feel comfortable contributing to this huge environmental churning of data. And I get that. So I've had to really actually change my stance mid-semester, you know, and that's where we are. We are in a situation where it's not anymore where, okay, we're going to observe the trend, kind of sit on the trend, do a little bit of research for a couple of years and see where it leads and, you know, that kind of stuff. No. This is really fast. This is really, really, really quickly, rapidly changing our ecosystems within a matter of days. You know, a month goes by and so much has changed. And I can understand why some of us feel like we're in this tornado, this sort of educational tornado. And yeah, I get it. But again, you're doing the right thing by being here today. And yeah, that's my answer to that question.
It's so interesting you brought that up because just this morning, for students who are sitting in, I just had somebody who included a little paragraph in his publication. This is how much we had to use in terms of computing resources by using the AI and the machine learning. So that is definitely there. And even part of the justification for using one model over another was because one model was using less computing resources. So I think I'm going to hand it over to Sam then, because I think he's got loads to say about that. Could you go off of what Bethany says and also your own experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the key words that I heard Bethany use was skepticism. And I think this is something that we see a lot of when it has to do with AI in all domains, right? There's always this kind of black magic, black box approach, especially from the outside. People who don't work in the domain feel that you stick something in and something magic comes out. How can I trust what's coming out of here? And this is really the key word is trust, right? Like, but I think it comes back to kind of if you allow me a little tangent here, you know, there's this kind of human history of our relationship with technology, right? If we went back to 800 CE, you know, Charlemagne's just been crowned emperor, and you know the percentage of humans that can read or write in Europe is tiny, right? There's a tiny fraction of monks and scribes who are painstakingly handwriting out Bibles in beautiful calligraphy, you know, a skill set that, you know, at the time was very much appreciated. Fast forward to, you know, 15th century, Gutenberg's printing press comes out and people can now punch out Bibles, you know, on the go, but also reproducible and you know, certain amount of trust in the reproducibility of those things, but also distributes and also adds a level of equality of people being more, you know, more accessibility to content, more ability to read, more ability to write. But you know, there would have been certain skepticism and obviously a certain trade, you know, that people who had that skill set of calligraphy now no longer quite valued in the same way it was. Fast forward to 20th century, typewriters, word processors, computers, and so on dramatically changed the way that we communicate and the way we write and the accessibility to information and the skill sets that are involved in producing that content, right? You know, while, you know, we can still look at beautiful pages from these old, you know, scribes, things, you know, if you were applying for a job in data science now and you said, I can do calligraphy, they would say, well, that's a nice hobby, not probably a skill set we're looking for at the moment. And I think this is, you know, something that we have to think about when new tools like, you know, generative algorithms that produce language content come onto the field. This is a new technology. We are going to have skepticism. We are going to have trust issues, but certain technologies like this have a momentum and they will gain traction. They will get used, and we have to learn how to adapt, you know, the skill sets that we use for you know, and that we appreciate, right? You know, new jobs might require people to be skilled in prompting generative algorithms more so than they are at handwriting beautiful documents or even typing, or you know, how well they can express themselves in a given language. And so this is a certain thing that you know, so at the moment I feel like we're on a kind of boundary area where the skepticism is still quite high. right? Like, you know, if we talk about skepticism to computers, well, I think we're well past that state. You know, I'm sure if you talk to someone's grandparents, you could still find a few people who really don't like to touch those things. But like, you know, the overwhelming, you know, majority of humans nowadays are very comfortable with using computers on a day-to-day basis. So we might see this in the future, that we get to a stage where, you know, these ChatGPTs, Bard, and other similar tools become a normal part of our day-to-day use. And it would be almost laughable to think of the skepticism people had at this stage where we're having this conversation. So in the field right now, I would say that the skepticism is still quite high. I would say that in the lab where I work, there's still very few people who are using this, I'd say, actively for the work, right? There's still this kind of trust issue, like, what can I really get from this tool? Is it really useful for the work I need to do? But I think, you know, these are extremely valid points, but a lot of them have to do with the metrics we have currently for evaluating the skill sets that, you know, students need to have, right? So when we ask a student to write a scientific paper that goes to a journal or something like this, we're looking for a particular way of expressing the work. We're looking for a certain way of evaluating the work that they've done and their knowledge of the global background of the domain that they're, you know, working in. But, you know, we might come to a stage where, you know, these algorithms get so good at producing this content that this is no longer a good metric for evaluating the quality of someone. If I want to look at how good a researcher you are by looking at your papers, well, I can get an algorithm to generate a paper that's 10 times better than anything you could have done by hand. Is this really now a good metric for evaluating how good a researcher you are? And, you know, the fact is that this is something that could change over time, right? So right now, we're still using a fairly antiquated system for evaluating the quality of researchers. So it's not surprising that there's a high level of skepticism against tools that could, you know, be potentially useful for our work or not. As these things evolve, that discussion might change very dramatically.